Hello, and welcome to Math with Usna. In this lesson, we are going to use parallel lines. We're going to introduce relationships within parallel lines. We'll learn about theorems and postulates, and then we'll work through some examples. We discussed these four types of angles in a previous lesson, but we talked about how to identify them in that lesson. This time, we are specifically talking about these angles when the lines are parallel. That's the difference here. When the lines are parallel and they're cut by a transversal, what does that tell us about these types of angles? Now, it turns out you're only going to have one of two relationships. For the first three types of angles, corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, those angle pairs will always be congruent if the lines are parallel. Consecutive interior angles, these will always be supplementary. Now remember, this is specific to parallel lines. If the lines are not parallel, these theorems do not apply. Let's go through an example. Suppose AD is parallel to GE. So I'm going to start off by putting my notation for parallel lines. The measure of angle ABF is 6x minus 10 degrees. We'll put that in there. And the measure of angle GFH is 3x minus 4 degrees. Solve for the measure of angle GFH. Now, because these lines are parallel, I can make conclusions about those two types of angles. What type of angles are these two? They are corresponding angles. And if I think back to the relationship for corresponding angles, it is that their measures are congruent. I can say the measure of angle ABF has to equal the measure of angle GFH. Now what I'm going to do is substitute my information. And now I've got an algebraic equation that I can solve. I'll start off by subtracting 3x from both sides. And then I'm going to add 10. And I'll divide by 2. So I get x equals 2. Now read the problem. I'm not solving for x here. I'm solving for the measure of angle GFH. So I need to take a step and figure that out. So the measure of angle GFH equals 3 times 2, because that's my x value, minus 4. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, minus 4 is 2 degrees. So my final solution is that the measure of angle GFH is 2 degrees. Let's go through a proof. Now, there is a lesson posted on my channel that discusses in detail how to solve a proof, so feel free to revisit that if you need some extra help. Let's start off by putting our given information into the diagram. We know that GC is parallel to FB, and that's also the first thing that I want to say in my proof. And that reason is because it's given to me. Well, let's think about what that means. I always want to take my given and think about what that tells me. If those two lines are parallel, I've got quite a bit of information because I know a lot about the angle pairs. Now, I can't use alternate exterior angle theorem here. What I am going to do is mark off what I want. So I want ECG and DAB. Now, I know that those have to be congruent because that's what the exterior angles theorem says. But I can't use the exterior angles theorem. So what I'm going to do is try to make a relationship with one of those two angles and then work my way to the other angle. I'm going to start off by saying that angle ECG has to be congruent to angle CAF. ECG has to be congruent to CAF. And that is because they are corresponding angles. So corresponding angles postulate. All right, well, now what? I know that those two angles are congruent. I also know that this angle and this angle are congruent because these are vertical angles. So I can use that as my next step. Angle CAF is congruent to angle BAD. And that is because they're vertical angles. So vertical angles are congruent. I'm using a bit of shorthand here. Well, I can say lots of other statements, but I actually don't need to. So notice those two statements, number 2 and 3. They both have angle CAF, and the remaining two angles happen to be exactly the thing that I'm trying to prove. Think back to the postulate or the property where you have two angles that are congruent to the same thing. Angle ECG and angle BAD are both congruent to the same angle. That means they have to be congruent to each other. So angle ECG is congruent to angle BAD, and that was the transitive property. Essentially what I did in this proof is I proved that the alternate exterior angles theorem is true. If I asked you to prove the theorem is true, this is what you would do. You start off with the if part of the statement and you prove the than part of the statement. So I couldn't use exterior angles theorem because that is what I was trying to prove. If you learned something, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more videos.